C Company.
Presented by Still a Frog.
Army life is, in some ways, first and foremost about rigid time management. At 0500 you do this, at 0900 you do that. Looking at a day from this perspective, it becomes easier to handle, more predictable, no surprises. And I suppose that's why they ingrain this mentality in soldiers from the start. Surprises are the very last thing you want. There are too many situations in which you need to count on the regimented nature of life. When he deployed to Afghanistan for 8 months, life, at least around the home front, got a little less regimented and a lot harder. Prior to signing up for my role as an Army wife, I always wondered how they did it. These women with 2, 3, 4, or more kids, how they coped with even the everyday realities. Mowing the lawn, for instance, while simultaneously keeping an eye on a mischievous toddler and starting to cook the night's dinner. And then there are the evenings. Once the maelstrom of that's mine's and she's looking at me's and peanut butter and marshmallow fluff smeared Jackson Pollock style across every available surface subsides, the lights dim, you sit on the couch, and glance over knowing that he should be there, and just praying he will be again. And yet the couch with its phantom presence is still far preferable to the bed and its still unoccupied side. We were able to Skype on occasion. I was truly grateful for that, but it was sometimes hit and miss as far as Wi-Fi signal, more so ours than his. And when you're suddenly swarmed by jelly-covered hands, muddy sneakers, and an array of superhero sweatshirts, the briefly allowed conversation is far more about daddy than it is husband. Certainly, I wouldn't have it any other way, but I missed him. My heart ached daily, and my brain was, for the most part, disengaged. The other parents, husbands and wives, were lifesavers. C Company was more like a family unit than a military one, the good and bad that implied. The former certainly outweighing the latter, since coming to the base I'd received an avalanche of warm wishes and specific offers to help with everything from babysitting to cleaning and running errands. Everyone went above and beyond the call. Thank God for them. In terms of babysitting, especially, I was extraordinarily thankful. My 2 oldest were in school, but the baby, at only 3 yet, was a constant appendage, a high-pitched recording of "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," or "No, no, no," or the ever-popular chart-topping "Why, on which the pause button just never seemed to work. Getting even an hour once in a while to grocery shop without having to apologize to a weary store clerk tasked with picking up a downed rack of Advil or a smashed jar of pickles seemed akin to a trip to a tropical island, a quiet, kid-free tropical island. And then there was my class. How I looked forward to that. Don't get me wrong, my kids were everything to me, but to talk to people who didn't necessarily know the names and corresponding colors of every single Sesame Street character, or whose sentences weren't built solely around the words poop, pee, or potty, was bliss. I signed up at the community college for American poetry. I'd never finished my degree. Started, more than once actually, and each of my 3 starts was then postponed by a little thing called labor and delivery. I was mainly going to learn about and discuss that which interested me. I did 1 course a semester, usually at night. Last semester it had been forensic psychology. Not quite the CSI experience I anticipated, but fascinating nevertheless. My poetry class was, fortunately, every bit the romantic, deeply profound, stay up late contemplating the wild imagery of Whitman experience that I'd imagined it would be. And the fact that my professor was easy on the eyes certainly did not hurt. It was every Tuesday night from 6 to 9, during which my neighbor and fellow Army wife generously watched the kids for me. Until, that is, she couldn't any longer. Her mother had been in some sort of accident and she was taking the kids back home to help out. Finding another sitter on short notice, especially for my rowdy crew of 3, and in that particular time slot, was a no-go. Class dismissed. I got to attend once more before my neighbor left to go and be with her mom in Texas. After class, I went up to the professor's desk. For some reason, I felt nervous and consequently kept having to wipe sweaty palms off on my pant leg. I shyly throat-cleared to get his attention and then began speaking. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed the class. The room had otherwise emptied and he was busy stacking the papers he'd collected. "Oh, thank you," he smiled. His dark brown hair had fallen slightly over one eye, giving him this devil-may-care charm. "Unfortunately, I won't be able to come after today," I uttered. "Yes, my husband's deployed and my sitter has a family crisis to attend to. But I've learned a lot and your lectures have been incredibly stimulating." Was that an appropriate word to use? I suddenly felt like an inadequate tongue-tied teenager standing up there. "Well, that's too bad. I've enjoyed your insights. Your last paper especially I found thought-provoking." "Really?" I answered, not meaning to sound quite as surprised as I did. "Yes," he laughed. "You've a real knack for understanding the language of poetry, and also the poetry of language. Far more so than many in the class," he grinned. He had a warming smile, the effect extending to his eyes as well. "Thank you," I sheepishly mumbled. "Tell you what, I'm no soldier, never have been, but I have a great respect for those who serve, so if you ever have time and would like to meet at the library or a coffee shop to discuss the poems, just let me know. You have my email." "Oh, yeah, sure, that'd be... I'm not sure when, or I'd need to get someone to watch my daughter. She's just 3, but I would love to if... I will email you." Or something along those lines, I think, came out of my mouth. I missed the class. I missed using my brain for actual thinking as opposed to programmatically performing. I know it might sound selfish, but those classes, that one in particular, had been for me. As a mother with 3 kids under 10, it seemed there'd otherwise been very little that was just about me. So I emailed him a week later, even though I wasn't certain about it, not at all. But the idea was just so tempting, or at least the idealized version I'd conjured up. Sitting in a coffee shop across from this poetically impassioned, deeply reflective, dashing professor, participating in an involved discussion of Dickinson, Emerson, and Frost. Maybe I needed a break from being just a mom, or rather from being mom alone, orbiting around my computer, waiting for hints of his voice, a snippet of his face to appear, while juggling the world with 2 mortal hands. We met in the middle of the day, when it was easier to find someone to watch my tyrannical 3-year-old. He'd suggested a nearby diner. Okay, not exactly the velvet couch-housing coffee shop I'd had in mind. I'd probably seen one too many episodes of Friends, but it was quiet and the faux leather booth was comfortable. He'd brought several books along, removing them, as I had imagined, from one of those slightly distressed leather bags that looked as though it could accompany an explorer through the jungles of the Amazon, or just as easily be strapped around the shoulder of a handsome college professor. I very self-consciously then opened my Peppa Pig notebook and broke out my oh-so-sophisticated, well-chewed Scooby-Doo pencil. As for escaping from momdom for a while, I was certainly starting off with a bang. We discussed American Romanticism. We talked through portions from Leaves of Grass. He was genuinely enthralled by the subject. His eyes lit up when reading, and he grinned excitedly when I seemed to reach a new level of understanding. It was a moment in time that I wish I could freeze and just keep hitting replay whenever I needed to remind myself that I was more than just the diaper changer, the grocery carting sergeant's wife, more than a glorified housekeeper or put upon dog walker. Just more. I couldn't believe how quickly 2 hours went by. I hadn't even intended to stay that long. He reached across the table and touched my hand. A jolt went through me. Not good. Not bad either, but that which caught me off guard. "I'd love to do this again, same time next week." His tone and the look on his face were kind, honest. I didn't suspect him of any lecherous motives. I think he too got carried away in the tide of all this poetry, maybe even mistaking it for something else. I quickly stood, mumbled that I had to get my daughter, and left, notebook abandoned to the table behind me as I hastily walked away. At home that evening, kids finally asleep after no less than 9 bedtime stories, I was dusted. And then, that familiar sound. When your husband's deployed, you hang on to the notifications by ways of dings, buzzes, and beeps. Racing to the computer, I saw him. There he was, somewhat bleary-eyed, looking beyond exhausted, but smiling. "Kids still up?" he said softly. "No, just put them down." "Good. I was hoping to catch you alone." He paused. "I miss you like crazy." Goosebumps instantly ran up and down my arms. My heartbeat sped up, and I choked down sobs of sheer happiness. God, I miss you too, I wept. After hanging up, there was one more call I had to make, following which I emailed my professor. I wrote, I really appreciate you coming out and your support, but I can't keep asking you to do that. There's another wife that can handle babysitting for me. I'd really like to continue with the class. Thank you.